Hello everyone, the weekend's about to be here, and to celebrate that, we are going to feature another sparring match from the Teaching League. This time, it's Jinteki versus Haley in the Shaper deck. Alright, and to join us as co-commentary today, we have with us none other than one of the players of the match. That would be Chris. Say hi to Chris. Hi.
Hello. You'll see me on screen as AlwaysBeFunning. I'm a reformed Adam player, so yeah, just always be funning. That's my golden rule.
That's awesome. And unfortunately, you won't be playing Adam today. You'll be playing the Sparring Jinteki deck. But before we delve right into the game, please do tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and how long you've been playing the game.
I've been playing sort of on and off probably for the last couple of years. I'm based in southeast London, and most of my net running these days is on Jinteki or with my brother. Big shout out to Melanoscopy on Jinteki. I'm sure you'll see him around.
Alright, that's awesome. Okay, won't keep y'all waiting anymore. Let's get into the game. Okay, so you are going to play up against Emily Spine playing the Sparring Haley deck. So what do you think of your opening hand here?
I think that's a pretty good opening. Kagugo goes pretty nicely on. Usually put that on HQ because it's a hard end to run, but I know that Haley's going to be probably battering it a bit, and that will just ping a bit. The Celebrity Gift is a great economic start, but I can see that Brain Trust, and that is screaming to be rushed out.
Oh yeah. So you draw into a Violet level clearance here. What do you? So you play a Celebrity Gift. That's a pretty good move. Gets you your early money, and because you show the Brain Trust, you wanted to protect HQ here.
Absolutely. I find Violet level a really difficult card to know when to play. And there are so few occasions where I manage to get down to just having that in my hand that it's a really difficult one to know the best timing for it, and it's one of those things with that draw is just so unexpected that you don't know what's going to happen, and that as a less experienced player I find difficult, and I've just put that Brain Trust down with the 10 in and got that out, which I hope was the right thing to do.
Yes. I definitely. I can't fault you for that at all, because as you can see here, Haley is starting to run pretty aggressively on your R&D. So you snagged just the right window, that one turn where she did not run, and scored it. I mean, shipment from Tenin, of course, requiring you to make the runner to not make a successful run beforehand. So I think that was a good move. And then here, on your next turn, after scoring the Brain Trust, you purge virus counters because there was a Tapeworm in play.
Absolutely. I think Tapeworm it's either one of those things that you have to sit and live with, or you have to get it off the table as soon as possible. And in that occasion, I know the feedback filter is coming, and I know this is an economic law that's gonna kick in, and of course Emily's just drawn that feedback filter, and we'll see how that goes for me shortly.
Of course. So yes, this is some meta knowledge coming into play, and this is experience speaking right from the mouth. If you don't have experience with this matchup, you wouldn't know that if the runner is too rich, they can just install feedback filter and stomp through your ice. But you definitely knew that. I think you definitely made the right call. So props to you for that. Yeah. So now we move on. You have sort of stabilized a bit. You have a bunch of ice on R&D. So tell me, take me through your thought process. What compelled you to put so many ice on R&D? Both in one turn, yeah.
I knew that as a shaper, the pressure was going to be on R&D. That was where things were going to get tough. And with this Jinteki matchup, it's a slow game. It's one that does have to take a while, and I know that Emily's going to be trying to get the multi-access on our R&D, and that's probably the main shaper win condition, that and a bit of remote camping. So if I can make R&D, certainly for the opening of the game, taxing to get through, I know it's an inevitable that she's going to get through there, but hopefully I can just slow her down enough to build a remote.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. Of course, it's always a very tough trade-off to make because every additional ice you place on R&D is one that's not going to your remote. As we see here that you are trying to start a remote, you place an oboe carter in there with the Hokusai. But surely you'd like maybe one more ice there, just to keep your oboe carter that much more secure.
I think, just remembering back to this game, I think you are exactly right, Ben. I think really what we need there is I've made a misplay by double icing R&D because, as we will see shortly, agendas are going to start building up in my hand, and because the remote is that bit weaker, there's nowhere for them to go, and they stay there. So I think it's really hard not to be too damning on myself, but in the same breath,
no, it's okay.
I can see I've never watched myself play back again, and it's really interesting being able to see. Okay, that was one of the things, and maybe it's not the like the crushing moment, but it's interesting to see these like maybe smaller errors at the beginnings of the game and the way they impact later on.
For sure, yeah, because oftentimes you just don't even notice them if you aren't looking back at your games, which is something I find really useful. When you watch back, you can see a lot of things. For example, if the ice continues to be unrest on centrals throughout the entire game, you have to ask yourself, was it really that necessary to put the ice there, for example? And another interesting decision point as well is placing the Hokusai in the remote instead of something like R&D or HQ. It's an upgrade, so it can go on any server. I'm not sure how many games you've played on the Jinteki League, but have you ever tried placing Hokusai on a central to deter central runs?
Oh, absolutely. And that would be usually my first port of call for the Hokusai. The reason that it's gone into server 2 is to bluff that it's a Ben Musashi. And
nice.
Just to give that feeling of, okay, it's going to cost you 6. Even if this is an overcut, if this is an overcut, it's going to cost you 6 cards. And yeah, and certainly that's how I felt. I was like, okay, well, obviously I would maybe prefer this on a central, but I need to get this game moving and get it rolling in my favor. And if I can bluff this out with Emily thinking that's what I've done, then maybe that's going to work.
That's a very justified bluff. When you can justify your plays like that, I usually have no fault with it. That sounds perfectly cool to me. I didn't even think of the Ben Musashi bluff myself, so that's very good play. Moving on here to, no offense at all, but one of the more questionable decisions. So you reveal your hand with Celebrity Gift to gain some money, which is all fine and dandy, but then you discard a gala hat. Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on here. As you can see, agendas are starting to build up in HQ, and I was really beginning to feel that pressure. I knew, essentially, this matchup tends to be the kind of 3 or 4 times I've played it, seems to be me counting down to when the Brahmin engine gets going. And I think just having that pressure, that clock in my mind, is beginning to cause me to make some misplays here.
Yeah.
Yes.
As you start drawing more cards and seeing more agendas, you're like, panic. I can't do anything.
Our dear Jackson, where art thou in this game? It just would have helped me so much.
Definitely could use a Jackson or 3 right here.
Yeah.
That would be so good. Yes. Oh man, I really miss Jackson as well. I wish they were in the sparring decks because, losing to Agenda Flood is never fun. As we see Haley snipe yet another agenda off your hand and going up to match point. So that's pretty cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
This is a tough moment in this match for me. I think as soon as that Obokata went, the feedback filters down. She's not that rich yet, but I kind of know that's coming, and I feel like I'm fairly good at not tilting, but I know on this game I did a bit, and trying to push this Obokata out. It's been sat in that remote for a while, and I think this is. What do you think of this play, Ben? Like, just leaving that in that remote, and would you have checked that?
I'm glad you turned the tables on me. That's a pretty. So that's a good play. In the sense that it makes the remote look very suspicious. Why wouldn't you try to score the agenda immediately? So there's some sort of bluffing games here, which, well, to your credit, allow you to score the Obokata, putting you back in the game 5-5. But I think you would agree that it's something that you wanted to do much earlier, in the sense that you wanted to free the remote so that you could put more agendas in there so that she wouldn't steal it on HQ.
Absolutely.
So I'm perfectly cool with your slow rolling that Obokata, in the sense that it confused your opponent, and that you managed to score it as a result. The only problem is during all those turns while it was incubating the remote, your agendas were getting picked off like cherries from your hand, and that's never a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But that being said, you picked the completely right time to score it. She was poor, and you had 2 ice on your remote. Earlier, you only had 1 ice, which wasn't much of a stopper at all. You could easily get in and steal it.
So that breach dome and the Ben Musashi's just gone in server 2, and I think going kind of looking back, I like the Ben Musashi, not the Ben Musashi, the breach dome going in the remote at this point, because I've got a decent amount of money going on, and there's already the Hokusai in, so that's essentially another 3 credit tax on the runner, and just to kind of feel out whether it's I know there's not a stim hack in that Haley deck, but is she gonna pop the technical writer? Is there some more burst econ coming that's just gonna try and slam through? And Emily at this point just is drawing heavily just to, I think, try and get enough cards in the hand to be able to score that non-existent Obokata.
For sure, because at this point, she knows that at least one of those cards has to be a Ben Musashi. But here's the thing, and this is, again, credit to you, because you got to 5 agenda points. Haley must respect the possibility of you putting a brain trust in that remote, something that you can instantly win the game with next turn. So this is why she has to check it. Otherwise, if I were her, I could say, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to poke your R&D instead, maybe see 2 cards off the top. That's better than playing mind games with you on the remote. So this is something you did very well. The fact that you got to 5 agenda points this early, forced this run, which wasn't cheap, make no mistake. The Brahman engine is finally out, but things are starting to go back on top of her stack. And let's watch this glorious run where she takes a bunch of damage.
I love the inclusion of Breach Dome in this deck. Of course, for the Alice matchup where you just load up archives with the Breach Domes and just kind of go, okay, yeah, I'll start trashing things if you want, but here's the cost to you. But I think I miss a June bug or an overwriter in this matchup, and at least with the Breach Dome, it can't be nullified by the feedback filter. So even if the runner's rich, you still feel like you're getting some value out of that.
That's a big thing, yes. Diversification of damage. You have both net and meat, so, it can't just get past everything. So you continue on your never advanced games here, mining games here. What is in server 2? You've got to check it, because it could have easily been the brain trust of Philotic that's sitting in your hand right now. So that's another Ben Musashi in there. And surely she has to check this one as well.
Yes. And you can see almost in this hesitation that there's that thought of, okay, is this the right thing? And again, hindsight's 2020. This was the time, I think, to put that philotic or that brain trust in the remote. Oh no, I've forgotten how this went down. How embarrassing.
Original Chris was playing better than you are right now.
Yep. Original Chris was playing at 10 in the morning, not 10 at night.
Indeed, yeah. If anything, Emily Spine is right now in always be running mode against always be funning. Again, she has to check this remote every single time. I think the biggest problem for original Chris right here is that the remote, even though it has 2 pieces of ice, is not as taxing as it could have been. So let's talk a bit about the Grail Ice. So she's paying for 2 subroutines on each Grail Ice right now, because there's 1 subroutine on each Grail Ice and 1 Merlin in your hand, which you show every time. But going back to the Galahad that you discarded earlier, if you had kept that in your hand, you could have 3 subroutines on each ice. That would be that much more taxing.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially it's the Brahmin maths, isn't it? The fact that it breaks 2 subroutines and not 3. And just that extra click, that extra credit per piece of ice might just have given me a bit more space. But I think I'm fairly new to the Grail Ice. I think this is the first time where I've had to kind of get to know them. And they are a bit funny. Like, they seem, in terms of their relative strengths, and sort of how taxing they are on the runner, they seem quite mismatched, or they seem to have very different power levels, in sort of in the same way as the next ice do. But with the next ice, it's sort of, I think they're much more memorable because the bronze, silver, gold is really easy to remember, whereas the Grail Ice is a bit more difficult for me, certainly, to commit to memory.
Indeed, yeah. The Grail Ice don't see that much play nowadays, mostly because in actual decks they cost 1 influence a pop. That's not cheap at all. But
certainly,
they are indeed.
Certainly in Jinteki there are some different bits of ice that I think I'd probably want to slot in these deck slots.
For sure, yeah. They're not exactly the best ice by any means, but boy, if you get them to fire off their subroutines, they can do some serious damage. Of course, by this time, Emily Spine has Brahmin set up. And you do a very interesting jamming play here. Do you remember what you put in that server? It was a House of Knives, actually. Yeah. So you ran out of stuff to stuff in the server. All your Ben Musashis are dead. Your Hokusai's in the bin. You're like, all right, let's stuff the one thing that my opponent can't win with. The 1 point agenda.
Absolutely, you are completely right. At this stage, I was just like, anything that I do has just got to keep Emily from running HQ every turn. Which I think, to be fair, is a play that it pretty well achieved that. However, maybe there were better things. I wonder what you think of, because the other play that was going through my head at this moment was, do I start pitching agendas knowing that Emily knows there's breach domes in archives, and hit points are running out? Do you think now might have been the time to, because that third Obercarters, that's not going to get scored by me anytime soon.
Yeah, that is always a line of play to consider, and I'm glad that you actually brought it up, because so many people don't even consider it. In a deck with breach domes, that is certainly something you can do. Sometimes archives is the safest place because that's, as you said, where all your breach domes are. You just don't want to make it too obvious. Like, if you spend your entire turn drawing cards, like we see you kind of doing here, you spend your first click drawing a card, that becomes pretty obvious. Perhaps that's where Violet level clearance could come in handy. You're just playing that operation and you're ditching some cards, but they aren't necessarily agendas,
It could be, yeah, it could be, that early game gear check ice that's now not going to do anything, or, all
Yeah,
those plays.
exactly.
That Kamino, which has just entered into my hand, I think if this had turned up maybe 4 turns earlier, maybe 3 turns earlier, I have a horrible feeling we would have been looking at a different game here.
For sure, yeah.
It's just so taxing for Brahman to get to, having to, and it forces the runner to make that decision, especially in this deck, between, okay, can I afford to break all the subroutines, or am I going to limit the number of subroutines by limiting the number of cards in my hand? And does that mean I'm going to be able to get what's at the bottom of the server?
Yeah, Komainu's a very powerful piece of ice, but also very expensive as we see you stack it onto your remote here, putting you down to so few credits you can't even res it. What a pity. But
Yep.
you've got to do what you've got to do. She was waltzing through your remote before, so, got to make it that much more expensive, which you do.
Absolutely. And we can see that Obokata has just gone in the bin.
Yeah, so I do like that play. Unfortunately, it's a bit too little too late here, as Emily Spine finally decides to fire off with that wonderful blue card in her hand, I believe.
Absolutely.
The legwork's about to come in here.
Usually I hit those with the PE triggers.
Oh, yeah.
I have a good habit of doing that, but not this time. It was...
Oh, look, she's going for R&D instead. Okay. Looks like I didn't remember the game correctly either. So let's see what you actually play on R&D here. This whole time, these two eyes waiting to do their work, they're finally getting the chance to shine. It's a vanilla.
It, was... there obviously is a point in resting it, but it feels kind of token and unnecessary at this point. I remember just staring at that technical writer with 11 credits on it and going, this isn't happening, is it?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to come back. Haiti has a very powerful late game indeed, which is why, stalling out the game doesn't tend to work well against this particular runner.
No, absolutely. There's definitely a question in my head as well over whether the single remote setup for this game was right, or whether I should. There's not really enough assets in it though, or enough kind of bluffable things to be able to try and go sideways. But maybe I could have tried to be a bit more confusing. Anyway, it's easy. I think easy to say that in hindsight, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the single remote was perfectly fine. Looking back, I also think that you spent a lot of clicks drawing cards. I think, as you can see, your hand is always full for most of the game, and there are lots of stuff in the bin that's, face down. That's exactly why there's violet level clearance in this deck. You can draw a bunch of cards for a single click instead of clicking for cards, which really helps you with efficiency. Of course, as you said, it's a very unwieldy card. It's very awkward if you draw into a bunch of agendas, and that's the high risk element of that card coming into play.
It certainly is, and I think, it's for me, it's a difficult sell in this PE deck just because there is nothing to mitigate against those downsides of it. So it was just. It's I think it's such a scary card, certainly for me to play anyway. I have missed exactly what's gone into that remote. Did you see, Ben?
It's a Hokusai grid. I was going to ask, would you consider putting one of those 2-point agendas in your remote? And the answer is always the same. Always be running. Better put something that she doesn't win with. So again, the right choice for you, as she's wasting clicks and credits getting into your now 3 deep server only to see a blank.
Exactly. And, I think at this point, maybe I was beginning to think, possibly maybe I've outlasted this okay. And now that, because that was, I'm pretty sure that was the 3rd technical writer to go. So, that big chunk of the Brahman Econ engine has disappeared. So what happens at this point? And unfortunately, it was all I had just tunnel visioned into drag Emily through that remote as often as possible. And I think in a minute, there's a strong possibility we're going to see where she gets frustrated with that line of play.
Indeed. So I think it's very it's perfect that you called out your tunnel vision, because that's exactly what happens here, and we all get tunnel vision sometimes. But in this case, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but the thing with, drawing so deep through your deck just to find the Ben Musashi to put in the remote is that you're not even threatening to win the game this time, because you're only on 1 credit. So she doesn't even need to run the remote this turn.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit of a problem, because now she doesn't have to run the remote, which means she can go for R&D or HQ here, as we see her hammering on R&D.
Yep. It was all slightly falling apart at this point. This is, I have to say, this was the bit of the video I was maybe not looking forward to watching so much. But it's, anyone who has the facility to go through this and to watch these things back, I've learned so much in the last 20 minutes just from having to relive this experience, and that's something I've never done before.
Yeah, that's the really cool thing about rewatching your games. And we see here that you finally make the right move. So escaping the tunnel vision of drawing through your deck, now you're clicking for credits. With 3 credits, you can threaten a winning agenda in the remote. So yeah, Emily Spine has to respect that. So good play here. But once again, just a bit too little too late, as things are going to happen.
Yes, this thing is going to happen, and it's never not going to win the. It could have. No. There's no way.
Could have if you put the Philotic or the Brain Trust in server 2 instead of the Hokusai. Very narrow, very slim chance, but hindsight is 20/20, of course. I don't fault you for putting the Hokusai in when you did. At the end of the day, of course, you lost, but it was still a pretty close game for most of the game. You were actually dictating the runner's tempo. You were forcing them to run the remote repeatedly. That was, in that sense, you were controlling a game. You were forcing the runner to do things that they did not want to do. So that was a positive aspect. As well as the fact that you got 5 agenda points early, where, going back to your initial question, was fast advancing the Brain Trust the right move? In hindsight, I absolutely think so. That was pretty good.
I would love to see a comment from anyone who has ever over-advanced a Brain Trust. Have you ever done that, Ben? I've never done that. It's just never felt like the right thing to do.
Yes, So Brain Trust was printed back in a time where cards were not so powerful. A lot of power creep has happened since then, and Brain Trust unfortunately lives as a blank 3/2 agenda for the most part. There are very niche scenarios where you would want to, but as far as I'm concerned, for this particular deck, you're absolutely right. There's no need to have over-advance the Brain Trust.
Yes. But fundamentally, I really enjoyed this game. The Haley matchup is a tough one, and I think actually playing this PE deck against either Alice or against the leader deck it's a very different dynamic, and one that I feel maybe more in control of, because I don't feel quite so much on the clock. Whereas against this Haley engine, and I know that Brahman's coming down, I know those technical writers are going to be there, and everything's just going to be going back to the top of the stack, getting reinstalled, and I think just having that in my brain forces me to make some sort of early decisions, which are quite interesting, especially looking back on them.
For sure, it's really refreshing, I must say, hearing your perspective on this game, both as one of the players involved in the match and as someone who's I would say relatively new to the decks as opposed to me because I, built these from scratch. I think this game exhibited a really interesting dynamic. As you said, you were dominating the early game. They didn't have their engine set up. You could do whatever you want. And then once the Brahmin comes down, the tables kind of flip. And now you are, jamming for your lives, so as to speak. But that made for a very interesting match where both, there was an ebb and flow to the game. Both sides had their time in the limelight. And it just so happened that AlwaysBeFunning came out just ahead in this particular match. So that'll wrap it up for this game. Thanks very much, Chris, for your time here.
Thanks very much for all the fantastic content you put out, Ben. And just a massive thank you to AlwaysBeFunning for the game as well. A really enjoyable one for me.
And yeah, hopefully you're having good success in the league so far. I haven't checked the leaderboards, but I hope you're doing well there.
I think I've now played five games. I was late to the party, I'm afraid, and I think most of them didn't go my way so far. Everyone else has had a bit more practice than I have. That's my excuse, and I'm running with it.
Fair enough, totally fair. Well, I hope you're enjoying the league at any rate. But for you viewers out there, I hope you enjoyed this video as well and the refreshing perspective offered by Chris. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching. It's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's bye from me. Happy night running. See you next time.